Thanks for staying up later. We're joined tonight by Stephen Bochco, the creator of L.A. Law, Hill Street Blues. His most recent effort on ABC is Doogie Howser MD, which people are calling the surprise hit of the season. And let me start with a characterization which you can either support or debunk. Somebody once said about you, you make TV for people who don't watch TV.
I think to some extent that's true. I mean, that's not necessarily a conscious choice on my part. I mean, I'd love everybody to look at what I do, and I don't really design something specific to a marketplace, because I think you get into a lot of trouble if you try to do that. But I've heard over the years that, you know, people will say, well, yeah, you know, I make it a point to watch Hill Street or L.A. Law. I also think people lie a lot about watching TV. I think a lot of people watch a lot more TV than they'll admit to.
Hill Street Blues, we might say, is the most decorated drama series in the history of television. 25, 26 Emmys, several Emmys for Best Series.
Right.
What's the genesis of the idea for the program?
I think the genesis was Fort Apache, the Bronx. I say I think because Fred Silverman in 1980 wanted a cop drama on the network. And his notion was a large ensemble that dealt with the personal lives of cops as well as the work life of cops. And I think it was inspired to some degree by Fort Apache, the Bronx. But we took the concept, the one-liner, if you will, and just ran with it. They pretty much gave us carte blanche, and we took it.
Well, you say they pretty much gave you carte blanche, but throughout the history of the show, there were battles with network executives and censors, right?
Oh, sure.
One show, which I think was early in the program's history, where some guy was found in a hotel room with a sheep.
That was like in the third season, I think. Hill and Renko are called to a tenement hotel, and they bust the door in, a terrible smell, and they find this guy's been in there, you know, dead for a couple of days, and there's a sheep in there. And it was clear from the evidence that there was a significant relationship between this guy and this creature, you know, because I think, if I recall, the sheep had a little bow on around its neck, and it's very touching.
Sort of the Gene Wilder deal from Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex.
That's right.
Except he didn't die, he simply just became a bum, guzzling woolite to try and drown his sorrows.
His sorrow. Well, to give you an idea how far things came over the years, NBC said, we have done a lot of things on this network, and we have put up with a lot of things from you on this network, but this one is where we draw the line. We will not put this story on Hill Street Blues. You've got to take it out of the script. We didn't take it out of the script. It went on. The Republic didn't fall. Fade out, fade in. Some years later, on L.A. Law, we did an episode about a morning kid show host who was in love with his pig. And nobody batted an eye. He was in a divorce proceeding, and he wanted custody of the pig, and there was a big battle. It was very funny.
You had to invent some phrases, because I guess you wanted to have the language be as gritty as necessary to be representative of the feel around a police station, but obviously you can't use all those words on television. So you actually invented some colorful phrases that sort of created that same atmosphere.
Hairball, hairbag, dirtball. It's just all that stuff.
Did the Hill Street writers actually create those very expressions that are now used?
Sure.
I mean, no one had said hairball or dirtball before
hairbag.
Hairbag?
I heard hairbag for the first time from an ex-New York cop by the name of Bert Armis, and I just thought it was a wonderful expression.
One last question about Hill Street Blues. Michael Conrad's death and the days leading up to that. What do you recall about that?
Oh my God! It was so remarkably heartbreaking, but it was also so inspiring, awe-inspiring. Here's a guy who had terminal cancer in a very advanced stage. He was hospitalized, and one day a week He was getting out of his hospital bed, getting in a car, and coming to do roll call. And he never missed a show. He never missed a single show. And he died 3 days after he did the last show he ever appeared in. We had to create some interesting situations in order for him to be able to do that. But we figured if he had the courage to get out of his bed and come do the work, then we owed it to him to be ready for that. So we always had double production schedules.
Yeah.
But he would, you know, reading off of cue cards, he was always taking these horrible chemicals and things. He'd do a take of something. He'd stop in the middle. He'd go off and vomit, and then come back. And you'd have people standing around going, "Oh my God, how can he do this?" You know. And of course, my feeling always was, how can we not? I mean, you're looking at something that is really rare here.
And in the series, he was something of a ladies' man.
Yeah.
So you had him die in the saddle.
Yeah, we did. I know some people had a tough time with it, but and we got a lot of mail about it. But we wanted to celebrate life, not celebrate death. And you know, it's interesting with television shows and the actors who portray loved characters. The line between who the actor is and what the character is gets very blurry. And a lot of the mail seemed to indicate that audience felt we were being disrespectful to Michael Conrad. Mm-hmm. And aside from the fact that Michael loved what we were doing with him, there is a legitimate distinction always that has to be maintained between an actor and the role that he plays.
This might be indelicate, but he knew he was dying.
Of course.
Did he have conversations with you about how will you take care of the death of my character?
No. No. The only time, I think part of Michael's defense against giving in was in not really giving in even to the notion that he was dying. The only time that I ever discussed it with him is he called me one Friday evening, and he was very angry. And I was on my way out to dinner. It was like 7:30 Friday evening. And he started to argue with me about a script, something that we were doing for another character, and he was saying, well, I ought to be doing that part because of this and because of that. And finally, I lost my temper. I was on the phone with him for about 20 minutes. And I said, Michael, why? I can't understand. You know, what are you doing here? Why are you making such an issue about this? And there was this terrible pause on the phone. And he finally said to me, because I'm dying. And I'm afraid that you're gonna write me out of the show before I'm gone. And I just said, Michael, that'll never happen. We are here for you and with you, and your character is revered and will continue to be and creatively honored, and it's going to be up to you to tell us when you can't do this work anymore. And that was the only time we ever talked about the fact that he was dying.
Hey, hey! Let's be careful out there.
You like to use some of the same people in various projects, an ensemble sort of thing, not just for, obviously it's an ensemble cast for Hill Street Blues, but then you take some of the same people and move them around. Is that by design, or is it just something that kind of happens?
It's sort of by design. You know, part of it is just the security of knowing who and what you're dealing with. It's really fun to work with your friends. The pressure of television, the hours that you commit to it, are such that when you work with your friends, it's kind of an opportunity to somehow include your personal life, your social life into your work life, and all the edges kind of get blurred, which is really nice. And additionally, selfishly, there's a tremendous advantage because you work with such speed in television. There's so much shorthand required in the production of television that when you're working with actors that you know well personally, you bring so much more to the typewriter to fuel your imagination and simply your knowledge of their work, what they do well, what they don't do well. I mean, I knew Tucker for 25 years.
Michael Tucker?
Yeah, and he was this little short, fat Jewish guy who I knew had a remarkable charm with women. Women have always loved Michael Tucker. Now, he's never had a problem with girls, you know, ever since we were in school. So you know that what he looks like and what he is in life are rather different. So when you hire Michael Tucker, you put him in that role, you know you can take that character someplace that people don't expect you to take him because you know that Michael's going to be able to do it because it taps into something fundamental to him.
Is it really true that L.A. law, they think, has increased law school admissions?
That's what I'm told. I mean, I keep reading that is the case.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, you be the judge. I'm not sure. There's got a lot of lawyers out there.
Is this leading people to believe that lawyers lead sexy and romantic lives?
Gosh, I hope so. Because I'm looking for L.A. law to stay up there for at least another 3-4 years.
You know that after Watergate, journalism school admissions skyrocketed, and everybody got the idea that every journalist could become some kind of a celebrity.
Well, you watch 5-6 years from now, you know, there's going to be like dozens of 16-year-old doctors out there.
Doogie Howser's going to start those, those prepubescent medical school admissions.
You'll go for your annual physical, and some 16-year-old kid will say, bend over, Mr. Costas. You'll love it.
Yeah. Doogie Howser's a 16-year-old kid who's a child prodigy.
Right.
And now he winds up doing surgery. He's a doctor.
Right.
Now, most child prodigies, we have a stereotype in our heads. They're kids who play chess or they're mathematical wizards. So I guess this humanizes him a little bit, brings him in contact with other people as he goes through his specialty.
Right. Although if you read a lot of the critics, they're having an awfully hard time accepting the premise of it.
Somebody wrote that it's a bad idea done very well, that the kid who plays Doogie, Neil Patrick Harris, is very attractive, that the show is well written, that it's well done in every way, except the concept is so preposterous that you can't get your arms around it.
That's what they keep saying. I mean, I don't think so. There's a lot of room for disagreement there, but I do keep hearing that it's a bad idea done well. But I have yet to hear anybody tell me why it's a bad idea. I've yet to hear anybody make a convincing argument that something like that could not occur. There's certainly nothing in the law that would preclude that sort of educational achievements.
I would guess the objection would be the intellectual brain power exists, and it's one thing if you bring that to bear in solving trigonometry problems or in figuring out how to beat a computer at chess, but there's a human aspect to medicine and to dealing with people in distress that no 16-year-old, no matter how intellectually brilliant, would have the emotional maturity to bring to that.
If you're talking about a prodigy who has rather remarkable accomplishments, there's certainly no reason to assume that it would be impossible for that young man to have certain emotional aspects to his character, which are also, to some degree, beyond the norm.
Maybe the point is, it's an entertainment show. Why does anybody have to believe that this could happen in real life? Maybe they just have to accept the premise enough to enjoy the half hour.
Well, I tell you, I never read a review about Alf that said, you know, this is an amusing show, but it's very difficult to accept the fundamental underpinnings of this concept. It's a hand puppet from Mars. I mean, what are we talking about?
Or about Batman that said, wait a minute, wouldn't he have to reveal his real identity when he went to register the Batmobile? You know, I mean, there's certain things you just accept,
That's right? That's right.
What's your favorite Doogie episode so far?
We did an episode where this little girl who's just about to have a biopsy says, "Is it going to hurt?" And he says, "Yes." And she sort of makes a face, and he says, "You know, I made myself a promise a long time ago that I would, you know, that I would never lie, because when in the backstory for Doogie, he had leukemia, twice, acute leukemia, and you know, he was lied to about things."
How'd you first get involved in television, Steve? What first attracted you to it? Classic child of TV?
No, I don't know if I was a classic child of TV. I didn't have you know, we didn't have a TV in our house until I think I was about 12, something like that, 12 or 13, maybe a little younger, 10. And I was always out in the street playing stickball and stuff. So I mean, I was never whatever the 1950s version of a couch potato was.
Yeah.
But you know, the medium grew up at roughly the same time I did, and by the time I got out of college, I had a real impulse to be in the film business. And I didn't really specifically think of television. I was thinking more in terms of movies. And I got a job at Universal through a family connection, you know, a summer job. And they invited me to come back permanently when I graduated Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon, in 1966. And I went back. And in fact, I did work in the feature story department for a while. And then inevitably, because I wanted to write, I kind of got slid over into the television area because that's where you wrote.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a violinist. He was a child prodigy. He concertized extensively when he was younger, and by the time I came along, he was hacking out a living as a commercial violinist, doing recording dates and concerts. He was for some years in the NBC Symphony Orchestra under Toscanini, and then when I was about 6, 7, he quit the business entirely. He was so frustrated with the music business and his inability to, you know, really make a decent living.
A guy who was a concert violinist and who didn't have a TV in the house. How did he feel about the direction his son took?
He was thrilled. I mean, not initially. I mean, initially he really discouraged me from doing anything of an artistic nature. I mean, he saw the arts as a world fraught with pain and frustration. He wanted me to be an engineer, which I had no brain for whatsoever. But in fact, as I got into the business and became successful in it, nobody was happier or a bigger booster than my father.
Yeah. During the week we taped this program, Stephen Bochco is the recipient of Channels Magazine's Excellence in Broadcasting Award. And we thank him for joining us, and we thank all of you. See you later.
Back to the Future, tomorrow on Later with Leah Thompson.